Welcome, dear reader. Today, you'll step into a story that speaks of pain, hope, and growth. It's about how rejection, heartbreak, and loss can break a person, but also shape them into someone stronger. This story will show you hidden truths, silent struggles, and moments when it feels like the world has given up on you. But it will also show you how even in the darkest times, a small spark of hope can light the way. As you read, remember this thought. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters in our lives start after the most painful endings. I was born in a small town in Ohio, where life was simple but not easy. My name is Daniel, and from a young age I knew I was different. Not in a special way, just different. While kids my age played outside, I sat by the window, drawing pictures of places I wanted to escape to. I didn't fit in. Not at school, not even at home. My father wanted me to be strong and fearless, like he was. But I was quiet, sensitive, and always lost in my thoughts. My first taste of rejection came when I was 8. I remember standing in front of my dad, holding a drawing I was proud of, a picture of a city skyline at sunset. He glanced at it, frowned, and said, "You're wasting your time. This won't get you anywhere." Those words, sharp and cold, stuck with me. I folded the paper, tucked it under my bed, and stopped showing him my drawings. But rejection wasn't just at home. In school, I was the kid no one picked for teams, the boy who sat alone during lunch. I tried to fit in, to laugh at jokes I didn't find funny, to be louder than I felt comfortable with. But nothing worked. The more I tried, the more invisible I became. I started to believe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't meant to be liked. When I was 15, life dealt a blow I never saw coming. My mom, my only source of warmth, passed away after a short illness. I remember standing at her funeral, the cold wind cutting through my jacket, staring at her coffin as people spoke words that felt empty. I wanted to scream, to tell her I was sorry for not hugging her more, for not saying I love you enough. But it was too late. After Mom died, my father became colder, drowning his grief in silence and long hours at work. Home felt like a place I didn't belong anymore. I'd sit in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of words left unsaid. I wished I could hear her voice one more time, feel her hand on my head, telling me everything would be okay. But the silence was louder than anything. By the time I turned 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bag, took my sketchbook, and left for New York City, chasing a dream I wasn't sure was even real. I thought leaving would fix everything, that a new city, new faces, and freedom would erase the loneliness. But loneliness doesn't need a familiar place to find you. New York was nothing like I imagined. It was loud, fast, and uncaring. I struggled to find a job, slept on park benches some nights, and often went to bed hungry. I'd sit in coffee shops, sketching strangers, hoping someone would notice, maybe offer me an opportunity. But people passed by, their eyes filled with their own struggles, not seeing the boy in the corner fighting invisible battles. One day, after another job rejection, I broke down in the middle of a crowded street. I sat on the curb, tears streaming down my face, feeling like the world had chewed me up and spat me out. A woman named Claire, a stranger, stopped and asked, "Are you okay?" Those 3 words felt like a lifeline. I hadn't heard genuine concern in so long. Claire was an artist too, older, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She took me to a small art studio she worked at. It wasn't fancy, just a room filled with paint, canvases, and the faint smell of coffee. She let me stay, gave me a corner to paint, and paid me to help clean the place. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in years I felt seen. For months, I painted like my life depended on it, because it did. Each brushstroke was a way to pour out my grief, my anger, my regrets. I painted my mother's smile, the loneliness of park benches, the coldness in my father's eyes. People started noticing. They felt something in my art, emotions too raw to ignore. One evening, Claire sat beside me, looking at a painting I'd made. A boy sitting alone, his shadow filled with faces he'd lost. She said softly, "Pain creates art that speaks louder than words." She was right. My rejection, my losses, weren't just scars. They were stories waiting to be told. I submitted my work to small galleries, faced more rejections, but I kept going. Each no was a step closer to a yes. Eventually, my art was featured in a local exhibit. I stood there, watching strangers stop and stare, their eyes reflecting the emotions I had painted. Some cried, some smiled sadly. That's when I realized my journey, as painful as it was, had meaning. Years passed, and my name grew in the art world. I traveled, held exhibitions, and even taught young artists who felt lost like I once did. But success didn't erase the past. One day, after a big show, I found an old box in my apartment. Inside was the drawing I'd hidden under my bed as a child, the city skyline at sunset. My father's words echoed in my mind, but they didn't hurt anymore. They were just words. I decided to visit him after all those years. We sat in awkward silence until I pulled out that old drawing. "I kept this," I said quietly. His eyes softened, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. He reached out, his hand trembling, and said, "I was wrong. I'm proud of you." That was the moment I realized forgiveness isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about setting yourself free. My journey from rejected to renowned wasn't just about art. It was about finding myself, facing my demons, and understanding that even the most broken pieces can create something beautiful. So, if you're reading this feeling lost, invisible, or rejected, remember, your story isn't over yet. The chapters ahead might surprise you, because sometimes the people who feel the most forgotten are the ones with stories the world needs to hear. I left my father's house that day with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness, not fully. It was something softer, quieter, like peace. For years, I had carried his words like heavy stones in my heart. But hearing him say he was proud, even if it came late, felt like setting down a burden I didn't know I could let go of. I walked through the streets of my old town, memories flooded back. The cracked sidewalks, the old oak tree where I used to sit and draw, the small corner store where Mom bought me candy when Dad wasn't looking. It all felt like a ghost town filled with echoes of my past. I realized something important that day. Places don't change. People do. The streets were the same, but I wasn't. I was no longer the boy who felt invisible. A week later, back in New York, I received an email from an art gallery in Chicago. They wanted to host my solo exhibition, a big deal for someone like me. My heart raced as I read the message, but instead of jumping with excitement, I sat quietly. Staring at the screen, I thought about how far I'd come. The nights I slept on park benches, the days I went hungry, and the countless rejections that almost made me quit. This moment wasn't just about success. It was proof that I had survived. When the day of the Chicago exhibit arrived, I stood in the middle of a brightly lit room filled with my paintings. Strangers walked around, admiring my work, some whispering to each other, others taking photos. But my eyes kept drifting to one painting, a piece I had titled "The Boy on the Bench." It showed a young boy sitting alone in the cold, with shadows of people walking past him, unaware of his existence. As I stared at it, a lump formed in my throat. That boy was me. But he was also every person who ever felt unseen, unheard, and unloved. Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I had turned my pain into something that mattered. People weren't just looking at my art, they were feeling it. After the event, as I packed up my things, a young girl approached me. She looked about 17, with tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. "You're painting," she whispered, pointing at the boy on the bench. "That's how I feel every day." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Sometimes words aren't enough. Sometimes the simple act of being there, of saying, "I see you," without actually saying it, is all someone needs. That moment stayed with me long after the exhibit. It reminded me why I started painting in the first place. Not for fame or money, but to connect with people who felt like I once did. Lost, rejected, alone. Over the next few years, life continued with its ups and downs. Success didn't mean life became perfect. I still faced challenges, still battled self-doubt, still had days where the shadows felt a little too close. But I had learned something powerful. Rejection doesn't define you. What you do after the rejection, that's what matters. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside my apartment window, I found an old letter tucked inside a book Mom had given me before she passed. I had never noticed it before. The envelope was yellowed with time, her handwriting neat and familiar. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I'm sorry for leaving too soon. I wish I could be there to see you grow, to watch you chase your dreams. I know life will be hard sometimes. People might not understand you, and you'll feel like you don't belong. But, my sweet boy, you belong more than you know. You are special, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Never let anyone dim your light. I'm proud of you, always. With all my love, Mom. I broke down, clutching the letter to my chest, sobbing like I had never sobbed before. All the words I had wished to hear, all the comfort I craved, were right there, written years ago, waiting for me to find them when I needed them most. That letter healed parts of me I didn't know were still broken. It reminded me that even when people are gone, their love never leaves. It lives in memories, in old letters, in the lessons they taught us. Time passed, and my art reached places I never imagined. My name appeared in magazines. My paintings hung in galleries around the world. But the most meaningful part of my journey wasn't the recognition. It was the connections. The people who reached out to tell me that my work made them feel less alone, that it helped them through dark times. One day, I received a message from my father. He was sick, cancer, the kind that doesn't give you much time. I flew back to Ohio, unsure of what to expect. When I walked into his hospital room, he looked smaller than I remembered, fragile and tired. We didn't have one of those movie-like reconciliations. There were no dramatic speeches or tearful apologies, just quiet moments, shared memories, and the simple act of being there. On his last day, he held my hand, his grip weak but warm. He looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I was proud of you long before I said it. I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't need more than that. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment." After he passed, I stood by his grave, the winter wind biting at my skin. I thought about all the things we didn't say, all the years we lost. But I also thought about the boy I used to be, the boy who felt invisible. And I realized he had grown into someone his younger self would be proud of. Rejected to Renowned isn't just the story of my life. It's the story of everyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong. It's about the power of resilience, the beauty of broken things, and the truth that even when the world says no, you can still say yes to yourself. So if you're standing at the edge, Feeling like giving up, remember this: you are more than your failures. You are more than your heartbreaks. You are more than your rejections. Your story isn't over. Keep writing.